Welcome everybody to MAN471. My name is Roland and these are the slides I used when teaching fundamentals of project management at International Business School in Suzhou between 2017 until I resigned in September 2019. For our 8th session, I was looking more specifically at the scheduling and budgeting, namely how do we actually create a budget and a timeline for the project. Essentially, we want to find out when do things happen and how much will they cost. And the reason why we are doing that is we need to be able to have a 360-degree project evaluation before we actually start spending money and allocate scarce resources. There's several methods how we can do that. For example, the top-down versus bottom-up approach. There's different methods and how to cost things in order to create a template of what we are then measuring against. So when we are then gathering the resources, we access our procurement plan and purchase the resources in order to complete the tasks in the projects. Now, obviously, we need also allocate time and money for potential revisions or changes of the plan. And that is something we need to approximate using risk management approaches. Now, we're using the work breakdown structure as an input to understand, well, these are the different pieces of work that we need to complete. And this is how much will it cost when we want to complete this in this kind of environment and time. Now I want to look at the top-down as well as the bottom-up method, because when you are having an initial idea, there is not much sense in detailed planning of any kind of project. So you will go from a very fast but very inaccurate method to a more and more accurate method the longer you are or the closer you are getting to the project. It's also worth mentioning the last point, add a shot of reality. Things go wrong, things will cost more, and things just happen in a project. And once you have a lot more experience in these kind of things, you can price that in as well for the time as well the budget. Now, the top-down method is quick and dirty. You have experienced people that are looking at the project and saying, okay, this is how much this piece of work is going to cost. You don't need to understand much of the work breakdown structure or the single work packages. However, when you are looking to create a schedule and budget via this method, you will have a lot of uncertainty and change in it. On the other hand, it will be very, very fast to achieve a general screenshot of how much will it cost, how long will it take. When you are using the bottom-up method, you explicitly use the work breakdown structure and cost every single work package by actual experts, namely those who are doing the work. This is extremely accurate, but it will be very slow, overloaded. And when you are asking the people that are completing the work to tell you how much will it will cost more. And when you ask them how long will it take, they will tell you it will take longer. This is called the fudge factor. And especially when you know that when you come up with an idea that will cost 100 currency units and take 100 days to implement, and you know superiors will immediately cut 20% of the budget and 20% of the time, you price that in and you say, well, it will cost 130 days, it will cost 130 currency units. The problem is both methods, including the fudge factor, are not giving us a realistic picture of the project. Now what you can do is you can use both methods. You can use different approaches to costing. You can ask multiple people. You can say, okay, I want this a bit more realistic. I say things take 5% longer and cost 10% more. Whatever kind of risk profile and whatever kind of budget flexibility you want to have, you can play around with these numbers. And at the end of the day, it is better to have more than one plan instead of having no plan at all. Now, when you are looking for top-down methods of estimation, the consensus method is very similar to the Delphi method, where experienced people are discussing until they come to an agreement. The problem with that method, as always, is if you have a very experienced or very senior, very influential person in this group, people will tend to agree with that person. So instead of a realistic view, you have one person's view, which is the exact opposite of what you are trying to achieve. The ratio method is looking at previous projects. For example, in construction, you have average costs of houses price per square meter. You have software development cost in terms of what kind of features you want in the software. But these are just approximations which you then can adjust to, for example, inflation or complexity. When you're using the bottom-up method, you have very similar approaches. For example, templates are using previous projects and adjust accordingly for changes in the actual product or inflation. Then you are looking at bottom-up methods. You are looking at ranged estimates for work packages. So this work package could cost from 30 to 35 currency units. So what you are getting if you aggregate lowest and highest estimates, you get a budget range, the lowest possible and the highest potentially possible budget that you can then use in order to create the full budget what you want to do. What you're normally doing with this kind of range estimates, you are looking at least at 3 figures: the worst case, the best case, and the most likely case. However, you want to then calculate the final budget out of these numbers is depending on what kind of likeliness you assign to each of the cases. This is a method you use very often in risk management. A final thing I want to introduce is the so-called hybrid estimation. Especially in greenfield projects and where you are working in high-risk environments, what you do is you split the project into different phases. And only the current phase that you are running will get a detailed estimate. So during phase 1, the need estimate, you will have a very broad budget. During specifications, you will go into a detailed estimate of how much will it cost to define the specifications of this project, and so on and so on. With every single step, you are coming closer to the end of the project, and more you will be able to incorporate real life on the project experience. Now, when we keep saying every project is unique, obviously this has the advantage that when working with real life, real project data, you will get more and more refined estimates. What that does is range target costs that you can then measure against with an error margin that keeps declining the more you progress in the project. Now, when you are doing costing, you are looking at what does each work package cost. And very often people only look at the direct cost, for example, labor, material, equipment, and other direct costs. And at most add a proportion of the project manager salary or any kind of rent that you need to pay, for example, renting premises for the project team. What is very often forgotten is to price in general and administrative overheads. For example, how much will the accounting cost as a proportion of the total accounting cost? How much does senior management cost us every year, and how much of that are we going to allocate to the project? So obviously you can play around with these numbers to look at the real cost of the project. Of course, this is then, especially with point number 3, general and administrative cost, open to exploitation in many forms. Bear in mind, change happens. It's so important that it's in red. And we need to understand that every change alters our baseline. We need to change the plan accordingly. Now, when we are looking at our estimates, every now and then we should really look at how is this progressing, what are we actually doing, and we will realize, okay, this is going off the plan. Now, why is that? First of all, we assume that every single task is independent. However, especially in a project, they are depending on each other. So there is interaction cost between the tasks. Then Murphy's Law, whatever will go wrong at some point. Now, for example, equipment breaks at a critical moment. People get sick just before they have to deliver a critical milestone. A delivery doesn't show up. Risk management is aiming to approximate these situations, attach a financial and a time value to them, and then say, okay, this is how it will impact the project. Obviously, when we are talking about refining estimates, what we do not mean is that real life experience of the project is completely changing our estimates. Then we haven't planned properly. We had no idea what we are doing. But how are we doing that? In phased estimates, we have the previous experience. What we can also do is we assume higher risk frequencies and impact. So we assume that bad things happen more often and are more impactful in terms of time and budget. We can also play it safe and increase the margin in the budget and the timeline. Essentially, what we are doing at the project management office, we look at our database of information of how did our previous projects go, and we try to refine and update the plan of the project, the baseline, as frequently as possible. Thank you very much for your attention. See you the next time.